think it becomes small country. And I think it becomes quite clear that on the global scale, Denmark is a very small country. And we're part of the Nordic countries, so we're located in the northern, cold, rainy, windy region of Europe, and we're 406 million people, only constituting around a bit under 0.7% of the global. But what we maybe have lacked in size, we've certainly tried to make up for in ambition and I guess climate arrogance, because right now we are among the world leaders. We've achieved more than 70% wind and solar on our electricity grid over the last 50 years. And we still, even with Europe, some of Europe's highest amounts of renewable energy in our energy system, rank among the top performance and security of supply. So we're very proud to say that we have one of the most renewable energy systems, but certainly also one of Europe's most resilient energy systems in modern times. And I think by far the most thing we're proud of is that we have managed to do all this development while not giving up our economic ambitions. So in the same period where Denmark has aimed to reduce total energy consumption by more than 10% and reduce our emissions by more than 40%, we've also managed to improve our economy by more than 75%. So it's really at the heart of us that renewable development, sustainable development is not the compromise to economic development, but can also be the root cause and promote sustainable development. And of course, we often say that there's something that often lacks in these countries that are beginning the journey, is this that we need to see to believe. And for many countries and for many other similar starting on the journey, you can see and you believe in what you have, but obviously when you look at this transition from one thing to another, you know certainly what you can lose, but sometimes it's a little bit more vague what you can gain. But for us, we have seen and we do believe, and for us the green transition is a proven domestic success that can be replicated. Because Denmark, in a period from 50 years ago, has managed to go from being 99 dependent on imported, largely fossil-based energy, to now being one of Europe's highest renewable energy producers, but also being one of Europe's biggest energy technology exporter. So we have the biggest share of energy export in our industry in Denmark. We have world-leading companies within wind, district heating, energy efficiency, all following the long-term commitment and vision to the Danish government that was formulated into 5 companies that are now world-leading in their industries. In Denmark, although we are only 6 million people, we estimate that more than 75,000 people are employed in the green sector in our economy alone. And just to put that into perspective, just try to get a rough ballpark of what the coal industry here in Indonesia employs. And I think the rough number I found was 160%. So it really puts into perspective how many jobs can be associated with the green transition. And although we've already managed to create quite a significant amount of jobs, just the realization of the plans we've set for ourselves in 2030, we expect the total number of 300,000 jobs will be the result of that transition. I think usually it works best not to praise yourself, usually works best if other people's praise you. So I just wanted to include some awards Denmark has received over the years. World Energy Council has named us the world's best energy system. The World Bank has named us the world's best investment condition for investments. And the World Wide Fund for Nature has named us the first place to start green entrepreneurship. So yeah, usually works better to get other people to. But yeah, that bragging will move into maybe the content of today. And I really think we'll take some breaks along the way, but if there's anything that you want to discuss along the way, please just break in. Also, if there's anything you want to be clarified, then certainly there's no shame in stopping and we can discuss things along the way. That's how it works best. But today we're trying to discuss how to drive sustainable development and how governments can do this and attract necessary investments. And just before we go too deep into it, I just want to keep this overarching umbrella, because I think what we usually say is that sustainable development sounds very clear, and we all think we're talking about the same thing. It is some development that reduces reduces our emissions and avoids depletion of our limited natural non-renewable resources. I think that is will try to everyone. But what we do see is that although there is a shared goal, there are many roads that lead us there, and it is part of the problem of getting there. Because obviously, this is a lifetime project. Remember, Indonesia has a 2060 net zero target, Denmark has a 2045 net zero target. That means certainly in my lifetime, we'll have to see every aspect of our economy change. So it means that when embarking on such a big mission to change certainly every aspect of our economy, it's a big ask. And it can only be realized if governments are alongside it and set clear directions and get conditions right to support it. Because I think reality is that we cannot start an industry at once. We need to rely on our government to try and set clear direction and work to achieve this lifetime budget in a systematic and timely manner. In Denmark, we usually say that sustainable development is like a puzzle. Certainly, there are things that are more important, but really the reality is that every piece of the puzzle needs to fit if we are to succeed. But on top of all these puzzles, none matter more than the clear targets and the clear objectives that are being put forward by governments. So I think it's increasingly important that people like you are trying to take this journey and figure out what are going to be the targets of tomorrow for Indonesia and what are going to be the objectives of those targets for Indonesia. And from those targets and objectives, we need to work together to ensure that the conditions around achieving those targets are developed in a suitable manner to support that. But they will try, certainly there's too much ground for us to cover in a very short period of time, but we'll try to take some of the core elements that will be part of the range journey. One is the governmental leadership that is certainly necessary to go on this journey. The second aspect that we'll dive into is the long-term condition that we have in Denmark of working together with the private sector. Of course, you say, again, back to Denmark, that we don't have a 24 welfare state, but actually, you know, we have quite a strong state, quite a strong national organization of state budget and state-owned enterprises. We are mostly proud of how those state-owned enterprises and the state itself works together with private industry, because that's really where the Danish society comes to life. And then to try and give it some maybe more realistic perspective, we'll talk about the thing that is the most important to come to when you look at the implementation, and it's the de-risking. And for that, rather than trying to talk about big picture, we'll talk about the latest industry that we might get more to it, so of course the pioneer offshore industry. And we'll take a case study to look at how we achieve that, how we manage to really fabricate a global industry that is now taking off from basically our own. So as the first step, let's talk about a little bit about the governmental leadership. So, in reality, we usually, I think, all of our bosses, they like to show up and they like to sign agreements with big flashy targets, and that certainly is important to set ambitious and reliable targets. But it's important to note that governmental leadership really also takes place in other parts of the aspects. Government needs to be present, needs to be the drivers in demonstrating both the projects that are part of these targets, but also demonstrating the capacity of both labor force but also the industry in their ability to achieve those missions. Once these industry projects need to be carried out, the government is at the point of trying to ensure that this development is sufficiently regulated and there's a clear way to get permitted and there's an adequate evaluation of de-risking research. Because what is really clear about development in Denmark but also in Europe, that if government fails to de-risk the set of regulation and permitting, the transition becomes very, very expensive and very, very delayed. And both not losing and of course lastly, in Denmark, competition is on our part. Of course, Denmark is an open economy, and it is our philosophy that any development needs to be based on ensuring the most possible competition in the market. And we do that course, the competition for us in our market is the best prices for us to achieve. But it's also because we have an ambition that our own domestic industry needs to be faced with the hardest competition from our international competitors, because that is really the only way that they can keep the pressure up to ensure that they have a place in the global market. That is why there is no local content requirement in Denmark, and we're trying to promote everything as globally as possible. Everything is communicated in English, all the different regulations is also. And then, nothing is free, at least initially. So what we see from all these developments, of course, the first step is always the hardest. We've all had New Year's resolutions to run more, lose weight, and I think everyone knows that the first one you go on is solving the hardest. And that's also the way it is when we have to try and split our economies around. We see really that the first years are both the hardest, but certainly also the most costly for the government. I think we'll see through our presentation that there's certainly also a carrot and if government is really necessary economic incentives that might subsidies, taxes, or other kinds of emission-based instruments, there is a lot of benefits that way economically as well. So why is government ambitions and targets so important? They are so important because it is the clear signal that can be sent from government to basically everyone who's participating in your development. It is the signal to market to invest in this economy. It is the signal to the developers to prioritize this market. It is the signal to manufacturing to set up an industrial base here. Without clear targets, ambitions, and stability to that, simply what we see is that these companies that we want to attract, they don't have the confidence to really establish themselves in our country. Of course, this also is related to other aspects of industry. We also, of course, want to build a labor force to part of the economy that does not exist yet. And a more clear message we can give to our both companies but also our universities, the better chance we have that they can prepare the labor force that we need to ensure that we can answer and deliver from our own domestic market when we need to really act on our ambitions. The key important features are when we're trying to develop these ambitions and targets. It is that they are long-term, they are transparent and clear, so that there is no doubt within the people who need to receive this message to engage. And maybe above else, what Denmark is very known for is having very stable both political conditions, but certainly also regulatory and financial conditions. But we have to realize that today what we see in Denmark is really the stepping stones, I guess, maybe in Spain we've just started in public administration, we've had one maybe a little bit before, because really our achievements today are the realizations of a very old Danish vision. You know, Denmark is credited to have the first energy policy developed in the world, and there's everything that needs to wake up politicians and require drastic action come from a crisis. So Denmark used to, as I mentioned before, be very heavily dependent on fossil resources. Around 99% of our energy system was mainly based on imported oil. So that means that in the 70s, when oil prices hit, and oil was no longer available in Europe, and certainly not cheap, it meant that we had real, vivid problems sustaining our energy system. It meant that cars were illegal to drive in the weekend. That heating was not really affordable to do in your house, so you really had to enjoy the cold Nordic winters and get out and enjoy the bike because the house were not allowed.
This was before August was born, but I remember it. I remember Sundays, no cars allowed on the streets, not like here in Jakarta, one road car free, everywhere. People roller skating on the highway. So for the children it was nice, but for the grown-ups it was a tough time.
But I think it may not seem that ambitious today, but I think in hindsight it was very important decided from the Danish government, they already just almost 50 years ago, set the first target that they wanted to really establish an energy system that was successful in making our sustainability independent. It would reduce our depletion of natural resources, and then we would be the world leaders to try and develop stable long-term solutions to energy demand by utilizing renewable resources. And there's both a romantic reason why we did it that way. We'd like to say that we were visionary and careful back then, but there's also a reality aspect that Denmark has very limited natural resources. If you dig in the ground in Denmark, there's just dirt. There's nothing in there except dirt.
Except wood.
Yeah, it's good for agriculture, but really in the energy system, Denmark is flat. There's no coal, there's no minerals, there's no nothing there. So basically, we know that there was nothing really for us to base our energy system on. We did find some oil and natural gas, but that's a whole other story. But I think something that is really striking is that if you look at the energy policy here, it says the Danish energy policy, it's made so long ago that the wind turbine was a farmer's wind turbine, and we had never seen a solar panel before, so we just put in a picture of the sun. So it's really, it was really at the cost. But even then ago, we realized that long-term visions are not enough. And it's always been the mantra that these long-term visions need to be accompanied, as you also said, Susanna, with short-term measures. So already back then, we knew that the easiest way to become more energy independent is to reduce energy consumption. So really, this initial policy has become the heart of a long tradition of working, of reducing energy efficient, and has ensured that Danish industry is among the world leaders of efficient manufacturing. We also need that we're some of the top producers of equipment, pumping systems, district heating systems, isolation. Because it's kind of hard to realize that the cheapest way to transition is to not use the energy we don't have to. We also began diversifying our energy supply and all these things. But most of all this, I guess, in a one-day perspective, the Danish government heavily supported research and demonstration projects that would lead to the first major wind turbine being developed in 1970. So this is really just the first very long line of tradition for doing energy planning. Many plans have come and gone. I think the big milestone for us was back in 1990 because we became the first government that actually set tangible targets to reduce. So we in 1990 set the first targets by any government to reduce our energy consumption by 15%, but also we already set emission reduction targets by 2005 already back in 1990. So if we take it a little bit closer to modern day, I just want to try and put a little bit into perspective. This is a report that's very important to my time at the Danish Energy Agency. It has a very boring title, but sometimes things that are very important have very boring and very bureaucratic titles. This report came out in 2014. It's simply called Energy Scenarios 2050. And this is the first scenario that the Danish authorities developed to see is there even a viable way for Denmark to achieve a fossil-free energy system. So this is the first time a national government was investigating active pathways to try and achieve fossil-free energy system. The conclusions were that it was viable, also economically, but the problem was that there were multiple pathways to get there. And really, what the government needed to do, and needed to do quite urgently, was to take decisions on what pathway should be prioritized. Because I think what we see, certainly to some aspect in Indonesia, but also in many energy systems are long-term investments, and we get locked in very, very quickly. Indonesia, of course, has some investments in coal that are now complicating the transition, but I think this is not an isolated event, and we have also had incidents. But the short-term conclusion was that there needs to be very urgent, even though these targets are for 2050, we need to take decisions right now to avoid this being very costly and to avoid investing in the wrong things. And the main conclusion conclusion was that for Denmark, really, there were two pathways. Either we could focus on our bio resources, we would look into expanding our use of bioenergy in our district power heating plants. We would focus up our use of agricultural byproducts using biogas and other elements. Or we could go an electricity-based way and try and get even harder on our development of the wind industry. But the key conclusion was that these two pathways don't mix. So there was no, we could go a combined version, but it would be very costly and it would be limited synergies to develop. So from the technical agency, they basically informed government that to avoid costly and market effects, that a decision had to be made within 6 years to try and narrow down the Danish scope to achieve this vision. And I think German are renowned for being very practical and timely, but certainly Denmark we can only do that because already 4 years later the government decided to phase out support for bioenergy as a whole. And just 2 years after that, on the final date that was named in the original report, the Danish government released the biggest plan to develop wind energy. So it really showcases the use of long-term planning to adequately move into implementation is what is needed in the short term. And that is exactly what we need to do this. We have to realize that the journey is to start today, even though the mission and the targeted objectives are very far out. So we need to work together, technical agencies that develop the pathways and the people who need the policy evaluation. Because it's really only when those two come together that we manage to create the policy that is needed to achieve our short-term goals, but put us on the right path to achieve the long-term ambition. And that is very important. So to bring us up to speed, of course, we're still on this journey, and it's still long-sighted. On our near-term targets, we are very well on our way to achieve 100% green electricity by 2030, and achieve this first milestone target of reducing emissions by 70%. But of course, from there, we already know that the toughest part of the journey is ahead of us because Denmark has one of the earliest climate neutrality emissions targets in 2045. And that means that when we get done with the electricity system, we have to really face some of the really complicated problems. And I think for us, we see this as an opportunity to try to be world leaders again, because obviously the industries that we pioneered initially are now market norms, and now we see an opportunity to again try and pioneer and do things that are needed for the next generation. But I know usually, as I say, bosses, politicians, they like the targets, they like the long-lasting ambitions, but usually implementation and monitoring is not really very interesting. So that's why at the foundation of our climate act, our climate law that manages our emissions, we actually put in a yearly mandatory review to manage the problems. And what we do is that we have assigned certain time periods to the year that certain things have to get done each year. So every April kind of starts the wheel off, and what we do is that we take stock. So our technical agency, they evaluate the performance of this fiscal year of our emissions, and then they develop a projection with the current policy in place, what are our expectations for reaching our near-term targets. So they basically project our emissions to 2030, say, okay, are we on track to hit targets? If no, then they provide government with a list of recommendations that would be evaluated. And that is the responsibility of the minister to put together from that list of proposals some kind of plan to propose to Parliament that they have to agree on. And something we had to add on is that we found out that is not the hardest part. Usually it's fairly okay to get the agreement on what to do and what policy, but trying to get that policy into the financial law, that is really the thing that needs to get in. So we actually have to combine now the evaluation of initiatives and the proposal for the financial law complications. So we know that everything that gets decided in this space also has to have adequate funding realized, and it has at the very beginning. That starts a process where all of our independent NGOs, both state and NGOs, but also within their accounting of what we say we're achieving and try to hold us accountable. And I think usually we get praise from around here, but certainly in Denmark we're more used to criticism in the Danish government. But I think that is part of good governance. So I think I'll take this as the first break. This is a little bit about how Denmark plans and tries to take leadership. Next we'll try to do public-private partnership. I just want to take a pause here to see if there's anyone who has any questions about the journey so far. Yeah, please, man.
Thank you. Thank you for Ambassador. I learned so much more from the marketing because I've been to several cities and I've been doing some how the government of Denmark collaborated with to also not only expose but also promote other countries.
Maybe other country like that.
Maybe for the others, on how the government can also make sure that the government is from 1976 until now on how to maybe English will take some more. But we would like to learn from especially on how when you try to make sure that this effort will also be supported by investors. Whether you have for example then provide sandbox just to make sure that the incoming investors are still can cooperate. Maybe not all of them rely on renewable energy. How this can be facilitated.
I think these are very profound and key questions. I'll try to give them answers. One is this one: how do we align the mining industries in Denmark? And I think the first thing to realize is that in Indonesia there are many more mining industries in Denmark. So I think actually one of the early observations was that for the private sector, actually we began a process of combining industries. So we only really have two ministries that are at the core of the transition right now, and that is the Ministry of Climate, Energy and Utilities. And you already see a few ministries have been put together over the year. And what the vision is that we realize that honestly these are targets that really they need to be developed in a coordinated manner, because if we divide our responsibility too much, there's really no guarantee that we'll manage to create the necessary synergies. It is, however, also important to note that I know that Indonesia is a little bit more individual based in its governance, and that's there's no necessarily comment from our side, just observing. But in Denmark, we see government policy as uniform and not up to debate, and it's really nine ministries. They don't see it as their role to debate what is coming from the government. They see that their role to really facilitate. And to some extent, it's based on how we manage to secure the governmental and the parliamentary support. So Denmark is what's a representative democracy. What's really has been at the core of this transition is to negotiate these big coalition agreements on the climate change, such that there is a profound and very broad support from Parliament to keep the government accountable for what has been agreed. because we see that for some of these aspects, both in Denmark, but I think more prevalent in other areas of Europe, where maybe very slim majority or a very left-leaning or somewhere like a very specific position, I think will lead to the implementation over the years become very problematic because there's not universal support and transition governments and ministers or maybe not equally aligned with the position quite. So for us, these broad agreements they're very important to work. To your other questions, both on the public-private partnerships, I actually go into detail with that right now if there are more questions. And I think to your question how we can give confidence to investors, I think in short I can say it's all about getting confidence in the long term and then driving down the risk in the short term. And we'll look at that a little bit more detail when we look at the offshore wind. I think it works a little bit better if we look at a case study right speaking more of the rate. So if there's nothing else wrong. Any other questions?
Yeah. Can I?
Please go ahead.
I will act as a moderator for session. So because okay, so in this class we are divided into 4 groups.
Yes.
And then to have a fair opportunity for each.
Yes.
So I suggest that I will invite 1 participant each, and then at once, and then you can respond comments.
Of course.
Okay, we will invite from the group 1.
I think Mr. Your Excellency Ambassador will have another thing to say. Oh no, okay, so this is all everything from okay. So Your Excellency and August. So my name is Heru. I am from National Research and Innovation. I see that from your presentation, your excellent map to green energy. It needs a lot of technology. In our context, in Indonesia, which also we wish to be able to do that, we do not have this technology. So, is there any suggestion from you that how could we access this technology? Because it is not quite easy. Understanding our context. It has a lot of capital embedded on it that people don't like to easily share. They wish to be able to hold it so other people can in commercial. So how do you suggest that we could access this technology, especially to foster the research and innovation in Indonesia with the collaboration with Denmark? So we also could have the technology that could be used for sustainable investment or sustainable life that we all dream. Thank you.
I think I will modify the mechanism since the question is quite long. Perhaps you can respond to the question.
Yeah, just first of all, this is the first session and we'll take 2 more sessions.
Oh, okay, so
I'm
I'm sorry if that's
no,
still happen.
the question is still good, I'm just there to clarify.
Okay.
So to answer your question, because I think that is maybe at the heart of where Indonesia is at. Obviously, when we started our journey, conditions were very different. None of these technologies existed, so there was not really anyone to collaborate with. We basically had to go at it on our own. But obviously right now, the renewable technologies are mature, and they're not even just mature, they're also competitive right now. So we see all in Europe certainly, but also in this region, solar, wind, but also other types of renewable technologies are consistently managing to outcompete their fossil competitors. The problem is then the technology is there, but obviously you would like to insert it in an Indonesian setting, and then that is the strategy needs to be defined. And for that, vision is to find some way to encourage industrial-based development. And I think there's been, of course, local content requirements are the usual mechanisms. And I don't have anything against the concept of using local content regulation. It is an effective way of establishing industrial base. But I think what we've learned from Denmark is that there needs to be a little bit of patience on the journey. There needs to be a step-by-step process. Because obviously, again, if we have the ambition to set up the entire thing at once, what we see is that we'll manage to have a transition that is expensive and delayed. So what we have seen and what we have had success with is that we try and take some steps that we think we can have. What can we do right now? In countries like Indonesia, there's certainly a lot of jobs to do. The assembling of solar panels, it can be other things. And then the next step is to work in these public-private partnerships to really outline what is needed to take this step-by-step rollout. So that is one aspect. The other aspect that obviously we want technology providers to arrive in position, we have to acknowledge that it's a global economy and it's only global. So industrial base will only come to technology providers that will stop shopping in Asia if they think it is competitive. And I think if I was in Indonesia, the first step I would be to go out to hear these technology providers. Why they're not prioritizing that they guys want to prioritize. Because I can only speculate, and I would like to put in place a situation, but I'm government. And really, it's not me who wants to set up shop, it's the industrial technology providers. So if they're not what is missing for them to set up, they will have a much better answer than me. Because I think Denmark successes comes through that we can actively hearing our private industry, but also the global private industry in every step of the way. So we have always had an understanding. And I think maybe there'll be some more integration when we go through the private-public partnership because they actually lay out how we approach this topic and that sort of thing.
Thank you. Can you check to the second question?
Yeah, sure.
Boleh saya tanya
Just from group 2?
Group 4.
Oh, group 4, okay.
Thank you. You very fair explanation very much. But I interest to ask something about the educations, people education in Denmark.
Yeah.
To make the people to menyiapkan diri. To prepare. Gimana?
Baca saja. Online loh ini.
Langsung kencing dia mix.
Tonton dunia di streaming dia.
Bagaimana masyarakat bisa menerima visi pemerintah?
Ya, bisa menerima. So, how to enhance the
Untuk memberikan pengertian.
foundation hasil pemahaman but si trial until 1976 there is the work there.
How your government do to educate the people to embrace vision, very long-term vision together work bear the process of the long vision.
So how to go from steam to me? No, I think it's actually a really good question, and the answer is that there is different initiatives along the way. So certainly I don't think when STEAM was in public school, but when I was in public school, we actually had to learn about recycling, different different aspects to sustainable living. And at that early stage, of course, making sure it's important to try and instill a sense of responsibility, but also a sense of importance of this topic. It'll be important both for the support politically later on, but also to spark the interest for that field of education as we mature the human resources that we are. Well,
it is included in the public.
yeah, public school, you have to take some education in how recycling works, how climate change works, all these things. These are aspects that we teach all our children in public school. When we then head into universities, we've already been adjusting, so we always adjust our financing a little bit about what educations do we see are needed for where we're going and then what's being on offer. And from government side, of course, all education is free in Denmark, and that gives us a fairly easy hand to apply and fix supply and demand a little bit, because basically, in some essence, how many spots are open in certain education is controlled to some extent by the government. So along the way, we've been readjusting how many engineers should there be within, or how many civil engineers do we need to try and always ensure that we have the human resources that are needed. And then I think the last thing, and again, it speaks to the public-private partnership. What we did was, although the core foundation of working together between government and private companies, we've actually also mandated that the educational institutions are part and need to be heard as part of the public-private partnerships. And that means that they also hear from the industry and from government what is expected and can plan their.
So you're really aligning the needs for the composition of the D with the long-term vision.
Yeah. I think maybe the most complicated is for the existing vehicle, right?
That's complicated.
Very good.
Okay, I think we can move forward to the third question, Ismail from Group 2.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
See, I almost didn't recognize you when I saw without birth. I have several questions about the Denmark country policy regarding from oil investment, this sector. Certainly generate high foreign exchange for Denmark. This question I ask because I'm a supervisor officer in Indonesian police, so it's the same with this question. The first of my question is, what is the form of state supervision in the governance of these funds? You know what I say? What is the form of state supervision in the governance of this fund about investment in oil palm?
Government supervision?
Yeah.
The role of government in supervising the investment.
Okay. The second, what agency carries out the supervision?
What?
What the agency
Okay, what agency will do the supervision?
the supervision. And the third, last one, if irregularities occur, what step will Denmark take to address this problem? Okay, thank you.
How you supervise the investment company?
I think I'm not sure if it's about the palm oil industry in Denmark. I think disappointed when palm oil does not grow in Denmark.
So it's an investment in general.
Yeah, no, but I can say that obviously to try and put a little bit in perspective, I think the best reference is that we of course put in quite a lot of investments also in the biological resources in terms of our agriculture. Denmark is not really known for things like energy crops like palm oil is. We mainly have food grade crops in Denmark. But what we have done is that we've been focusing a lot of efforts ended utilizing the byproducts for especially the animal production. So Denmark is among the world leaders to utilize animal waste in introducing plastic biogas. And I think in a little bit this similar way, I know that for palm oil there's a lot of economic positive incentives, and that has not really been the way that we've handled renewable development for a long time in Europe. Rather in Europe right now, the mechanism is more that we're introducing increased tariffs to try and increase the business case for transition to renewable. So we just became the first country to introduce taxation scheme for our own agricultural scene, meant to really try and drive the transition to more renewable sources. We don't really have a good, some good examples I think that relate to the concept of providing support for these biological processes, because it doesn't really have any place in our economy. So maybe not the best answer, but sadly that's I think what we export to Denmark.
Thank you.
So mostly the investment in Denmark is related to renewable energy, like wind turbine.
Yeah, so the positive as the supportive investment is mostly related to energy and less so to biological processes.
What kind of agency then supervise of the?
Yeah. So in Denmark we have one ministry supervising everything, and we also have one coordinating agency, we call it. It's called the Danish Energy Agency, and we also but basically in a similar way that we saw the need to basically have one ministry coordinating all of these things. We also saw the need that one technical agency also needs to support. So the Danish Energy Agency is the direct agency under the Ministry of Climate and Utilities, and they have the mandate to coordinate all technical engagement on the whole climate agenda.
That's one-stop service.
We actually call it the one-stop shop.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe could I just, so I don't know if I'm over-interpreting your question, but with your background on police, so the elephant in the room is called corruption. Do I understand correctly that part of your question relates to what happens if funds allocated for this suddenly go somewhere else?
Yeah. Oh, no, okay, now
I think that's how I understood your question.
Yeah.
And of course, we have to say that we are bragging again. Denmark is one of the least corrupt countries in the world. I mean, every year there is this transparency index, and the Nordic countries are always at the top. So either it's Denmark or Sweden, and we change places, but we're always 1, 2, 3. So we don't have a big agency dealing with corruption. Because we don't need it. And this may sound like a fairy tale, but you have to try to understand that our society is based on a social model where corruption is not part of the genome. It is not prolific. It is not something that you find in all parts of society and you kind of live with it. It simply isn't there. So, I don't know if you heard about this index of who is the happiest people on the planet. It comes up every year, and the Finns are on top of the Danes and whatever. It is not because of the weather. It is not because of the good food. It is not because of going. No. They are happy basically because the questions asked to people are you happy? No, that is not the question. There is a long list of questions that turn around the same thing. And basically, people are happy when they wake up in the morning knowing that if something bad happens to me or my family, society / government will be there to assist you. So, if I get sick, I go to the hospital, somebody will take care of me. The same thing happens to my children or my old parents. My children can go to school. So all these things will be what make you happy. And if you have the general sense that government and society work for the benefit of the population, you feel happy. Even though it's only 15 degrees and not 30 degrees. So I say this because this is what makes what we call the Nordic society model work. That there is a general consensus in the population that government works for the benefit of the people, not for the benefit of the government, or not for the benefit of the ministers, and not for the benefit of the officials. So if you have this consensus in society, my personal belief is that corruption is not really, I'm not saying, of course we have scandals here and there, but it becomes a real scandal because it is the exception to the rule. When suddenly it is revealed that this official in the Ministry of X actually helped his friend get a contract. It's a scandal. It's a huge scandal. But if it's something that happens every day, the scandal thing disappears because then it becomes normal. In our society, it's a scandal because it so rarely happens. So it is not part of our genes. So to answer your question, we don't need this setup because it is not really a big problem. And we are fortunate that it's like that. Sorry, but
really the agency is for the administration.
Yeah. They deal with procedures and things like that. We don't need this. Of course, we have the police. If something happens, you file a complaint, and people can be put in jail if they do. But it is not something that happens all the time. So we don't need this big setup. We don't need a corruption agency. It's a crime, and it is dealt with when it happens. But it's very rare.
I already know that there is no corrupt in Denmark, but I won't hear from the Denmark people right now. Thank you, sir.
And of course, one thing that I'm sure you would agree, it is our experience that if you want government and administration to work, you have to pay your government officials a decent salary so that they can live on it, and they don't need to get extra income, if you understand what I mean. If that premise is not there, that is the root cause of so many problems. So that is an investment in your public administration that has to be done. So back to energy.
Okay, just short question.
Speaking about the corruption, my name is Victor Antonius from Public Prosecutor from this office. We talk about the corruption especially in Indonesia. What do you think, and how should we prevent corruption in Indonesia? Compared to Denmark.
Back from energy to so So,
From
I think,
This one topic.
I think
Interesting topic.
if I had a quick fix to that,
Yeah.
I could probably get a good job in Indonesia.
Precisely.
So I don't have a quick fix for that.
Yeah.
But as I try to explain, this has to come also from the bottom. There has to be a national consensus in society that this is something that we don't do. And it starts very low. So if you want to get into a school, you get into the school because you have the necessary requirements to enter the school. Okay, you don't pay anybody to get into the school. Okay, when you're in the school, you get the grades on the basis of your performance, not through other means. If you go to the doctor, you pay what is required for the services of the doctor, and you wait until it's your turn. You don't. So it's all over, but it's a pyramid. So if the basis is not there, you will have the problem at all levels. And the fortunate thing that we have in our society is that the basis is there. It is not the first thing you think of when you have a problem. Oh, how can I pay my way out of this, and who do I have to? No. There is a common consensus in society that this is a no-go. It is not accepted. And if it's not accepted behavior, when somebody crosses the red line, there's an outcry because it's a scandal. But if everybody does it, even at the small, tiny level, then it is that becomes the consensus. That becomes the accepted way to behave. And then you kind of, okay, if it happens at this level, it also happens at this level, and then you suddenly have it at the top level, but people are kind of immune to it. Because it is not such a scandal, because everybody does it, it's like that, and if he does it, I can do it. So it's really a question of mindset and a question of how society, from the very basic level, works. And if you have that, foundation of society, then, but it comes from what I say, you cannot fix it like that. It's a mindset, and we all have to work from the lowest level to the top level. So this is not an acceptable way, and if it becomes the acceptable way to do it, then it is the root cause of so many things. In my personal opinion, when people ask me what is the greatest problem for society, I say corruption. Because if you have a national emergency, you can mobilize resources and you fix it. If you have a lack of food, there is a possibility to fix it. But corruption is a cancer. It's a cancer. It kills all, and it destroys confidence in the way society works. And then I'm back to my happiness index. If you wake up in the morning and you don't believe that the government works for your interest, that the government will take care of you, because the government is infected with the cancer, how can you be happy? Even though the food is good and the sun is shining. These are other things that make you happy.
Love you.
I really want to add on, I really like to start on this co-reflection, but I also want to say that the core foundation in Denmark for avoiding, especially community corruption, is transparency. So in everything in Denmark, transparency is the core of what we do. If you want to see why one company managed to get the contract, you can just apply to see it at the government, and they have to show you all the documents that were part of making that decision. If you want to see what Steve salary, you can send them a session, you can get handed over. Everything is transparent in Danish society. And that makes sure that one thing there's confidence that you do it because you can always get the information to check. But it also makes sure that when we do when we do all these things, all the conditions are public. Everyone can see. So no one needs to consider the element of corruption because everything is out in the open.
Then this was one last question from Pak Mariano first. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Agus. My name is Vadiono. Please call me
Uncle Yon.
We are taking presentation from black to green, the story of Denmark. It tells him in Arabic language, Minat Rumadi dan Nuri. I'm from Islamic Canon of religious affairs. I have two questions about settlement recruitment and labor regulation related to sustainable development. Number one, how do you keep up with talent recruitment from incoming investors? And number two, how do you make sure that the investor will comply with the labor regulation in Denmark? Thank you very much.
Thank you. No, I think two again very good questions that are kind of on the outskirts of the defense. But I think actually there is some very easy answers. On the talent recruitment, I think we realized quite long ago that Denmark is, although we do everything we can to support our own talent development, our country is too small. So we have a very open labor market. So it's very easy if you have a specialized education background and you need, there is a job opening for you to come to Denmark and work in a specialized field. It's very easy to come into Denmark and work there. The second thing that we've done is that Denmark is very renowned for unions. So really on government, we don't use too much time to monitor the labor conditions because the unions do it. So almost all employees in Denmark are unionized, and the unions, they take care of monitoring that things go according to the union agreement. And it's part of the Danish labor model that government does not get involved. We don't have minimum wage in Denmark, we don't have all these conditions. The unions negotiate with the providers of the things. And the last thing that's important to know about Denmark is that our welfare state provides the foundation for you to survive if you get laid off one day. And that means that in Denmark it is very normal to lay off people if they don't fit, they don't have the talent, to lay them off because government will take care of them. So there's always the foundation, you don't have to feel bad about me. Government will take care until they can find new opportunities.
Okay. Let's for the question and answer for the first session and then continue.
Yeah, I think.
Applause, applause.
Now we'll try. I think I'll speed it up a little bit and manage just the first session.
Not seriously.
Move into something I think really could resonate very deeply into the future, and that is how Denmark can establish public-private partnerships. And just as a first step, I mean, in this transition to come, we need each other. Even though whatever government says, we need each other. And that means that in Denmark, we've organized these partnerships that include our organized groups of companies, governmental institutions, trade organizations, academia, all working together on sharing common goals. In Denmark, we have established 14 climate partnerships. Simply because when we made the climate ambitions and targets, we realized that for us as government, even though it's quite easy to say, okay, 70% reduction, that's a good target. How that should be realized, it needs to take place in every part of the economy. And for that, we really need the economy to speak back to us and say what is possible, what will be the problems. And to start that process, we divided up the economies into 14 sections. So we established 14 climate partnerships, all being managed and headed by the biggest Danish companies. And each sector has been given the responsibility in collaboration with their governmental institutions, their respective trade organizations, and academia to develop the pathway that they want to propose to government to decarbonize, the obstacles that would need to be addressed, and provide the recommendation for what government should do if they should be realized. And from that partnership, we've been working to really help industry inform us of what needs to do because they know best. So the 14 climate partnerships have been working alongside law and negotiations, and in total they have provided Danish government with more than 400 recommendations for change, short-term change. And in this essence, we've been more than willing to comply. And I think as the last measure throughout the years, more than 80% of recommendations given by the climate partnership have been implemented into regulation or law. So to speak this way, that we, of course, we need the industry to react. We should also give them what they need to perform. That is the mentality. And I think we actually already saw a recommendation from the climate partnership, because these energy hubs and islands that were part of the 2020 strategy were actually recommendations through the climate partnership for energy put forward by the biggest energy companies in Denmark. And that already 1 year later got put into government planning. So it's just one example of where we take what we hear and try to implement it as directly as possible. Obviously, there are benefits to this. And the beautiful thing about these partnerships is there's benefit both ways. For us in public, and the public sector, we managed to get the insights because, as you say, the people that said we need the technology to be ready, and we need the technology to be established. And really, in Denmark, it's through these kind of partnerships that we get information about what is needed to either develop these technologies or establish them in a meaningful way in Denmark. And also, imagine in these partnerships, we have all the biggest and best companies of Denmark together with all the brightest minds of academia. They work together regularly, continually. It means that we can use these to foster the innovation necessary, because it means we have the entire sector of Denmark sitting down together and all levels working together. And through that common understanding, they inform us of what is needed, but they certainly also inform each other and form the partnerships. What we also see is that oftentimes when we bring these parties together, they actually start reducing emissions without our intervention as well. So just in the process of being heard, we see private industry usually being quite eager to perform on their own, also because they can see what we're trying to push for them, and they obviously understand that when we engage them in this way, there's also expectation of them to perform eventually. Yeah. And I mean, we get in the end, hopefully, long-term, commercially viable technologies that are needed and mature in our society for the ambition and targets that we lay forward, for instance. For the private sector, it's a similar essence, For them, they can also achieve impact on us. I mean, they can affect us to provide recommendations, and we have showcased that we are willing to hear them and implement, so they can have direct access to achieve political impact. That is probably mainly why they are there. Second from that, obviously, we're the ones who procure all the big projects, and they want to affect the public procurement to be as fair. They're all there. So by all being there, we also see them working together to keep fair competition, because, and as I said, through this partnership, we create the foundation for continued dialogue with us, but maybe to some extent, even more importantly, with them, we see from these partnerships collaboration between private sector and academia form, collaboration between different companies that are not working together are shaped, and new concepts for public-private partnerships also form for these. The last is, of course, that we have multiple licensees permits in place. And we want to make sure that we can use these climate partnerships to stay on top, that our important companies are updated and they maintain and strengthen their license to operate in Denmark and keep their industry and their company in Denmark. And there's much more to this, but I actually think rather than take a lot more time, I just want to say we actually have developed what we call the climate partnership playbook that we launched at COP 2 years ago, and I think the plan is that we can share these with you guys in the end here if you want to take some more inspiration. It contains step-by-step guides of how governments can form these partnerships, what needs to be agreed, and its effect in the management and structure. So it's a much more detailed guide. I don't know, should we take the session now, or should we just probably carry to the end and take all the questions? Sure. Because if we continue, then we kind of look now at the overall foundations and that are important for the position. And to give you maybe something that's closer to implementation, I want to look at a specific sector that we're proud of. Because through this journey, Denmark, I think we're proud to say that we've managed to create worldwide industries multiple times in this journey. And also recently, that certainly is the case. Because just over the last 10 to 20 years, Denmark has managed to pioneer the offshore industry as a global industry that is set to really explode. And for that process to succeed, obviously we're back to where we initially started, of getting the foundation right, getting responsibilities, support, and investment together in one room. And actually, there's no reason to invent new things, but it goes back to the governmental responsibilities. So, obviously, to showcase this, we don't need to do any new sci-fi things. We just need to make sure the government has made the adequate planning to set the targets and ambition that sends the signal to the market that they support what is necessary to research and develop the initial projects and scale them up, to make sure there is transparent permitting and that government can work with the private companies to de-risk to a certain adequate level to establish an industry, and ensure that there's enough competition that both the price is fair and acceptable, but also that we are left with an industry that is globally competitive, and support them on the way as needed, because it's always expensive to start a new industry or start a new part of the economy. And for offshore, the history is recent. So just around where I was born, we began the initial project demonstrations ordered by the Danish government, where we established the world's first offshore wind farms. And I think from these large projects that are 5 megawatts, we are now looking at projects in the recent tender material. They are more than 2,000 times larger than we began a little over 30 years ago. So we slowly managed to ramp it up, but obviously we needed to also set a signal that there was a role for this industry to play. Already initially, we set very ambitious targets for the offshore industry, so that we can tell them that we mean business. So already by 2030, we're working towards having established more than 15 gigawatts of offshore wind in Denmark. And we've worked with our developing or neighboring countries to bring them on board to develop 150 gigawatts in the North Sea. Because obviously we can see their ambition, trying to get them to buy into our ambition also supports our ambition. We've also developed a consistent tendering strategy to showcase that there is a dedicated rollout that is reliable and transparent, so there's exact signal and the industry knows what they can expect to be given of opportunity from us. And we have been constantly hearing these private sector in public consultative dialogues to keep sure that the material that we put forward match with their conditions and limitations, because from experience we see that if we fail to do so, either we face unnecessarily high cost or delays to the process. So there was, yes, Dave.
So I don't know how much you are into, what does GIGA mean? Is that all clear to you, how much it is?
Yes.
Okay, because I was wondering if you could just put one sentence to put it into Indonesian context. How much are we talking about gigawatt-wise? I mean, what we're doing in Denmark relative to what would be in Indonesian context?
I think
Bigger one is bigger one. It's the same.
in European context, we would say that 15 gigawatts of offshore wind corresponds to 15 million European households. So obviously a lot more than we are people in Denmark, but it's because we're embarking on this new chapter where we see that this will be our main resource for basically other industries as well. So
Most houses for that. Basically only 2 kilowatts per house. In here in Indonesia.
yeah, I can say that roughly these 15 gigawatts of offshore wind correspond to around 12 gigawatts of coal power and electricity to form out production. So it almost corresponds similarly to the rollout, the COVID rollout, the fast track plan that was for the coal power. It's our version of that, and the scale is fairly similar as well. So, as actually the already was some hints, we saw obviously for offshore wind there is an extra avenue of complications because we already have an established way of working with it on land, but when you move to the water, you introduce a whole new array of ministries and agencies that have responsibility. There are shipping routes, there are marine lines, there's fishing, there's all these new ministries and agencies that need to be heard for these projects. And we realized that the investors, the developers, they don't want to navigate the Danish system. They're simply not interested. And it's too complicated for them. So we've developed what we call the one-stop shop. And it means if you're doing anything in energy, you only have to engage with one public entity, the Danish Energy Agency. They will handle all the coordination with the other agencies and other They are also the ones that coordinate all the various de-risking efforts that we do to make sure that the tenders achieve successful competition and pricing. For the financial support, obviously we knew that we would have to support the industry initially, and we've already developed the concept for the onshore industry. So the way that we do it is the government simply tender out projects with basically what companies were keen on was how much government support we would need. And the expectation was that through continued development we were able to bring this governmental support gradually down. And I think it's a very powerful moment for us to say that through these last 20 years of work, we've kind of come full circle, and actually now in the latest tender we did, actually the project developer had to pay the Danish government. So it really showcases this long-term vision of, yes, initially there will be a need for support and funding, but actually in the end, money will be delivered back to the state. But it takes some time and patience to get there. One thing I do want to put into perspective is quite a trend-setting moment for Denmark, because I think it's hard to see that actually initially there was kind of a little bit of an upward spiral. And what we realized is that we haven't done a good enough job adjusting the risks. So risk is kind of the poison that infects any project or investment. And essentially the more risk and the more complication any developer or financier see, the more they want to get paid. And really the best way to address is for government to bring down risk as much as possible and spread it out in a way that makes sense. Because the more certainty can be established, the better price and the lower support we need to provide. And actually what we did is that we began mapping each individual project that we did to see what kind of condition have related to the project, we began mapping out what we provided for the project, how we tendered, how long, all these things, to try and figure out what are really the kind of the keys that we can turn to try and bring this to sound. And I think what we realized at the Denmark project actually was a fairly, you could say, non-consequential. The problem was that we had created quite high penalties for delays. That was the simple fact that we realized. And the companies were simply too unsure that they could deliver in time. And of course, initially, that was because we wanted to ensure these projects were in line with whatever plan we had made. But when we realized that they were actually just this concept of forcing the providers to stick to a time schedule set by us with no flexibility was driving up costs by more than 50%. So really was a crucial realization. And I really employed that for all these projects, we need to set up systems to manage the learning. And what we have realized is that there are certain aspects of it. One thing is, the more information can be provided to the people who need to invest in the finance beforehand, the better. So, for example, for an energy project, we actually already do the environmental impact assessment. We do all the planning for the transmission grid. Everything is approved and ready before the project gets tendered out by the government. We already do all the preparatory work. It's just ready to build. Then we provide all. We also set up, if it's a wind project, we measure the wind conditions, advance, we provide everyone with wind measurements, and we do the initial calculation with them to provide a very easy foundation for them to develop their business case. And then, as the three-step to the tender process, we invite all the biggest stakeholders to give and we pre-socialize the tender materials to make sure that we have not missed any details that will be important to the key players. And I think through this kind of continued effort, we've managed to try and move back from this kind of blip that we managed to achieve in our project to a place where actually almost all projects have managed to secure some element of either very close to no subsidy-based production, to actually also providing some income back to the government. That's something we're very proud of. And I think I want to give you all the concept that I really do have respect, because the first step is hard. And although I know Indonesia has done a lot, you're still the first step in many of these industries and many of these technologies. And we have to realize that there is no pain-free way. There is no free way. There needs to be some element of sacrifice, at least initially. But if we are consistent and stable, it's worth it. Through our stable government work, we've managed to birth a global industry where Denmark, we are leaders. More than 33,000 people work in the offshore industry in Denmark alone. More than 62 billion Danish kroner, almost 10 billion euros are created each year, not in revenue, just in Denmark alone, not even from our global interaction. And we have the highest capacity of the technology served in Denmark. And then it is understood, but we also managed to establish the private sectors. The biggest wind turbine manufacturer is now Danish. The biggest offshore developer is Danish. The highest creation in terms of value creation to shareholders is the Danish offshore wind developers. And that is because we're looking into a new future. The energy giants, the company giants of tomorrow are green. We have to face reality that fossils, no matter what we see now, are on the way out. It was a very eye-opening point where we saw that our offshore developer Astor managed to beat out British petrol for market value. And that's been part of a long, systematic development we see all over the world. In America, the biggest renewable energy developer has managed in recent years to beat out the Exxon, the biggest fossil fuel company in the American market. decimate the fossil company revenue. We see it all the place. And you can also see it slowly moving to this region as well. So even though we're just at the early steps, this will also happen here. And it's important to realize that if we are not on the wave, we will invest in the dust like these fossil companies. So it's important to join the wave, not fight it. That would be my final message for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Through the second section of the question and answer. And like the first, I'd like to invite one is from participant from each group. So I will start with the group 4. Who will answer from group 4? I don't have name. More?
Second session.
Okay, and then the group 3, I will invite Fine.
Yes. Oh, okay. Thank you. My name is Di. I work in professional government of Southwest Papua. Okay, thank you. You explained about the government how many responsibility in the development, especially in economic incentive like a tax subsidy. What about the sanction? For the sanction for those who don't support the program?
Don't comply.
Yeah, don't comply. Okay, thank you.
It's a good question, and actually we've had to do very, very little effort in sanctioning. It's not because, it's not necessarily because not that we have to go back to the organization, but it's because we don't really have a mandated target approach. We simply don't put in targets that we have to sanction. Rather, what we do, Denmark and the Scandinavian countries in general are now for the market-based approach. In the US, they will call it socialist, but we're actually very market-driven in Denmark. And what we do is rather than we try to sanction and set targets for what industries need to use what, we simply calculate what is needed to either tax them or provide incentive. So we use the stick and carrot approach. We don't have to go out and measure and monitor anyone and sanction them. We simply just, if we need an industry to transition, we will provide incentives to what they need to do and provide taxes on what we don't want.
So, on your contract, do you have any service level agreement for some levels of parameters and indicators that would be met by the private sector?
No, so I'm quite sure I understand what you mean.
And on your contract with the private sector? So do you have some targets that don't have to be met by the investors? So for a certain time, a certain period, for example?
And again, it comes back to that actually we don't want to mandate the targets that way, because the fear is doing it that way is that because so many parts of society need to change, we want to do it in an efficient manner. And we don't know from government whether it's cheaper to transition the one industry to another. To some extent, of course, we do. But we want to provide the framework for the industry to transform itself. So what we do is rather than use sanction or provide some requirements in our public-private contracts, what we do is that we provide the economical framework that the best way forward matches with our vision.
So you said demand push.
Yeah, so for example, we also have all this cement. And each year we try to calculate what the cost of creating the cement. And what does it cost to transition this industry? Rather than go to that industry and say you have to use we simply just put the tax at the level that the cost is of transition, because then they have to do it. And it makes economical sense, and it's much easier for us than trying to go and force them to do something. It's much easier just to tax them. And it also provides us the opportunity to use that revenue to provide them with the support they need to do the other things. So it's like a quite common concept of what we call budget neutral initiatives. And we do those quite a lot in Denmark.
Thank you. Next question from Fadi.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Mr. Ambassador. Mr. Agus. My question may be a bit out of the context of new energy, but it is still very closely related to clean energy. We who are present here are currently concentrating on sustainable investment in the palm oil industry. Recently, a film entitled "The Palm Oil Plantation on the Land of Orangutan" was released. We really appreciate the screening of a film produced by Danish citizens about palm oil plantation and the lives of orangutans in Kalimantan. Because this film provides a very positive picture of the extensive existence of animals and palm oil plantation can coexist. This film also describes how the palm oil industry has empowered small rural communities. Maybe this question to Mr. Ambassador: how do Danish people feel this film? To what extent can this film come to the black campaign about palm oil and make a positive contribution to the Indonesian palm oil industry in the European, including in Denmark? Thank you.
Well, thank you. I had the pleasure of hosting the screening of this film at the Dutch Erasmus. And actually, the basis, the premise of the film is to showcase that it is possible to have a viable, sustainable, and economically successful production of palm oil, while at the same time working on sustainability and protecting the biodiversity. So the whole idea of the film is to show that it is possible. Because when you talk to, I mean, just in general, abstract, you say to palm oil producers, no, you have to stop using pesticides, you have to. The counter argument is always, but it's going to cost money, so we're not going to make money on our plantation, so we won't do it. So the conversation stops there. The idea of this is to show, okay, we actually have a very, very big plantation, which is very, very successful, and they still have managed to make this transition with the help of Copenhagen Zoo and people who are very much expert in biodiversity. So they managed to make this partnership. So the positive message of the movie is that it is possible. You don't have to sacrifice your economic and financial profitability of the plantation in order to be more sustainable and to protect the biodiversity. So the message of the movie is that. And that has of course been very well received here in Indonesia when we showed the movie, because that's for the first time there is somebody here telling us that it's possible, and you are showing us a positive movie instead of this black campaign that you're talking about. Okay. So your question is, what about the people in Denmark?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I can say that the response we got when it was shown at this very big, I mean, everything in Denmark is small compared to Indonesia, but for Danish conditions, very big documentary film festival, it was shown, and the audience was also very positive. And also in the movie itself, if you ever get a chance to see it, we will try to show it more. If you ever get a chance to see it, they are interviewing people in the movie, Danish environmentalists who come out of the theater, and they say, "Wow, that was a surprise. That was an eye opener to us," because they also have this imagination, that palm oil is necessarily bad. So whatever has to do with palm oil is bad because it destroys forests, it destroys nature, and it kills biodiversity. So this is the other narrative, and they come and say, well, it is possible. So you see from the two sides, you have the economic side saying we cannot do sustainability and biodiversity because it kills our business model. It can be done. Good. Okay, positive message. And you have the consumer saying we don't want anything to do with palm oil because it is by its very nature contrary to everything we believe in, sustainability and biodiversity. It can be done. So the positive message on both sides. What of course needs to be done is for this to gain traction, because one plantation is not going to make a difference. But you have to sow the seed. You have to spread the message and say that it is possible. And the more plantations that will go in that direction, the more the consumers will be convinced that it is possible to do it, so that eventually and gradually this bad black connotation, bad campaign will also, well, maybe this is palm oil that comes from sustainable production, and then you will overcome this barrier. So that is the idea. But as with energy, it's not going to happen tomorrow. But what we have been trying to do from the Danish side for quite some time is to say, okay, palm oil, yes, there is a problem, because we cannot deny that in order to have a palm oil plantation, you need land. Okay, if this land used to be tropical rainforest, it's bad that it's no longer there. Now we have all these oil palms, problem. But there are two ways of looking at that. We can say, as Denmark, as consumers, say, we don't want to look at that, that's horrible, we turn our back. But there are some facts of life that you have to deal with. So our approach has been, well, we cannot roll back. It doesn't make any sense. It's unrealistic to say, okay, now we cut down all the oil palms and we replant the tropical forest that was there. That is not going to happen. Given all the economic interests, the amount of small crops, I mean, this is too big to be ignored. So we have to take this as a fact of life. This is something that is here and is not going away. So what is the second best? The second best is to try to transform it and turn it into a more sustainable direction. So to work with it, to push it in the right direction, in our view, is better than to just say, no, we don't want to do that. And that is the message we've been trying to promote. And I think that is also what we're trying to do within the EU, to say we have to work with it. Because you cannot just close your eyes to what is an economic fact of life. So that is
Next question, I invite Pak Guntur.
Bahasa Inggris ya? Bahasa Inggris saja ya? Terima kasih. Saya bertanya kepada saya Guntur Aryo Tejo. My name is Guntur Aryo Tejo. I'm from police. energi terbarukan. Paling baik disampaikan tadi angin. Nah, bagaimana tanggapannya terhadap energi terbarukan yang di Indonesia ini adalah termasuk palm oil, sawit seperti itu. Apa kira-kira tanggapan dari pemerintah Denmark? Terima kasih.
So, part of the question is about the renewable energy that you focus like our staff presented that mostly on the wind turbine, but another source of the renewable energy is also palm oil. So, what is your point of view about the palm oil as the renewable energy, including from the palm oil from in terms of renewable energy?
No, I actually think it's a good question, and I think that in terms of palm oil and really any biological energy resource, I think the message from our experience, we also use biological resources for energy. For us, it's mainly the waste residue for our agriculture sector. But the essence is that once we only have the bioresources that we do have. And the experience that we're seeing, especially from South America and these things, is that as these the use of bioenergy for or bioresources for energy develop, it increasingly starts to compete with food and drive up food prices. That is the big complication with folks. And as we see transition of other sectors, we see basically a choice that needs to be how to utilize the resources that we all have. So I think my reflection on the palm oil is that it's a valuable resource. And obviously, Indonesia has abundant amounts of it, and we use it for many purposes. But there is a big exercise for Indonesia to really evaluate what is the most important sector for palm oil to be used for. Is it for the sustainable aviation fuel? Is it for the cars? Is it for... Because I think the reflection is our experiences on the long run, these biological processes have hard time sustaining very basic lifetimes because they are too well protected. That is the one concern that we face in Denmark. But I think there's been a lot of good work establishing the industry. I think for the next 10 years, there's going to be a lot of work to evaluate what is the most optimal use. Because as I see right now, they're still testing out palm oil use very many things. And as we begin more and more transitioning, I think that's going to be a bigger job and we should obviously require that.
Yeah, I think we have concluded with the questions. Thank you. Setelah ditutup nanti kita foto bersama Pak Ambasador dan
Seller, selfie together. Seller, selfie together. Kayak yang di belakang tambah-tambah lagi. Iya tuh.
Bapak Ibu boleh berdiri berjajar di belakang Pak Dut dan Pak Dut. Jadi kalau dikumpul semua di depan, foto dari sana
Ya, yang depan boleh ikut. Boleh. Tapi jangan lama-lama. Naik di depan itu bikin laporan ya. Hitung. Excuse me. 1, 2, 3. Ya. 1, 2, 3. Lagi. 1, 2, 3. Ya, semangat. Oke, tepuk tangan. Semangat dulu, Pak. Ya. Semangat dulu. Ya, pal dulu. Go together. L. 60. Sekarang 60. Baru dia itu yel ya.
Ya, 60. Ini kolaborasi namanya.
Ke dalam dikit, ke dalam.
Iya, aku nggak ikut nih.
Gun di depan. Iya. Stop. Video. Oke. Smile. Boleh ya, Pak? Video foto. Video lah.
Who we are?
PKN.
Angkatan 60.
Go, yes. Mantap.
Pak, minta masukannya Pak. Bagaimana tanggapan Bapak tentang kegiatan ini Pak?
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. We are in Ambassador Denmark. Pelaksanaan kunjungan di Denmark ini adalah bagian dari bagaimana memperkaya susunan polisi brief di bidang sawit. Oleh karena itu banyak masukan terkait dengan negara Denmark yang sangat luar biasa posisinya. Kita contoh banyak hal yang bisa kita ambil, terutama bagaimana masyarakatnya adalah masyarakat yang damai urutan kedua di dunia, kemudian juga no korupsi dan juga energi terbarukan itu banyak sekali yang bisa kita replikasikan di Indonesia. Terima kasih.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Ketua. Bagaimana Pak tanggapannya Pak?
Hebat Pak, keren Pak, ini keren Pak.
Pak Guntur. Pak Guntur. Pak, bagaimana Pak tanggapannya kegiatan tadi Pak?
Kita penjelasannya dari kedutaan besar Denmark. Dan sudah disimak cukup panjang, ada sekitar kurang lebih 1 jam. Kita bercakap-cakap terkait dengan investasi dan energi terbarukan yang ada di Denmark. Terima kasih.
Ya, terima kasih ya.
Itu mas, yang butuh-butuh tuh mas. Yang butuh-butuh ya.
See you in Papua, right?
Yes, I want to come. Yes.
Full picture with you. See the picture. Berdiri aja. I forget the
Yes, very good.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you, Besar.
Komitmen.
Keren, Pace.
Iya.
From West Papua.
Sekali lagi. Thank you.
Halo Pak Didi.
Ya, gimana Bu? Ini ketanggapannya tadi Bu?
Alhamdulillah lancar dan kita banyak sekali dapat pencerahan dari penjelasan dari Kedubes Denmark. Mudah-mudahan memperkaya policy brief dan benchmarking kita. Mantap.
Mantap. Pak Yusti gimana tadi?
Tambahan ya, kita banyak potensi untuk energi terbarukan. Kalau Denmark hanya angin, kita ada banyak. Tinggal kita butuh serius, komitmen dan kolaborasi.
Mantap. Keren. Terima kasih Pak Yusti. Terima kasih para pemirsa. Kita akan close dari online. Selamat siang, selamat menjalankan ibadah Jumat. Terima kasih. Gila. Langsung naik.